So, Rebecca, you're back in the office. Let's read some emails and talk about some of the things that you wanted to talk about. What do you say?
I'm ready.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor.
I'm Rebecca Bloom. I'm a therapist, and you can find me on Instagram at R-T-E-X-T.
Yeah. R text. Letter R text, as in texting someone. Rebecca posts all sorts of great stuff. Her art, her dog, her office, inspirational things.
Dog in the office.
Yeah. You're a good social media person.
I'm like, what do I see?
I mean, for our age, we're pretty good.
And there's my thrilling new how to make a matzo ball video, which,
How do you make it?
It's super simple, and I grew up, it's one of those things like pancakes. Like, I grew up eating from the mix. I never made it myself.
Oh.
And to make it yourself, it's so easy.
Uh-huh.
Matzo meal, salt, pepper, and you got.
Is there anything inside?
No.
It's just a ball of dough.
It's more dough.
Yeah.
That's why people love them.
Boiled?
Boiled in soup, matzo ball soup.
Okay. So, email. Anonymous patron, she says, I was supposed to get married recently, but I canceled the wedding due to the pandemic. Marriage has never been a goal for me, but in the last few years, I decided I wanted to marry my partner and was very excited for our wedding. Shortly before the pandemic, I was feeling overwhelmed with wedding planning and life in general. One night, I had a nightmare that our wedding day had arrived, but we'd completely failed to finish planning. It's such a common, by the way, it's just a common.
Right. It's a common anxiety dream.
My version of that is I get called back to a high school musical or play that I was in, and everyone remembers their lines, and I don't, and there's no script. So I'm just in the wings about to go on stage, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm supposed to say.
Mine is, I'm in a city I don't know. My phone, for some reason, won't work at all. And, like, I probably have no money and potentially no pants. Like,
yeah, it's always no pants. When I woke up, it was like a switch had flipped in my brain. I suddenly had no interest in having a wedding. I hoped with time the desire to get married would return, but here we are 18 months later, and it still hasn't changed. I want to get married. I think I deserve to experience the joy of the day and the marriage that follows. Could this be a subconscious defense in response to extreme stress? How can I go from being excited and certain about getting married to having no interest in a wedding overnight? Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, I think that we were just talking about this, that the pandemic made us both reassess a lot of things. Having planned a wedding, I know it's incredibly stressful. And it's like the pandemic kind of opened up this window. What if you could just get off that script and not do it? I don't think that weddings are over for you forever. There might be a time again where you feel the energy. But my phrase for the pandemic has been, if it's not value added, it's not worth your time. And that sounds like this wedding wouldn't be value added for you. Also, my social anxiety is through the roof. It is Passover tomorrow. We're going to host people at our house for the first time in 2+ years. And I just, the idea...
You haven't hosted at your house this whole time?
No.
Wow.
We did a video one the first time, which was hysterical. Last year, we had one person over.
Yeah.
And
this is the first time you've hosted Passover, but you've had people over.
I mean, small groups, but not Passover. Have you ever been to one? A Passover Seder? Oh, it's an epic 3-hour.
How many people?
Dinner and a show. We're supposed to have 7 people.
Okay.
And so
what are you worried about? Your matzo balls are going to be terrible?
I made matzo balls from scratch, and they will be floaters.
Oh.
For those of you who know what they mean, not sinkers.
Oh, really?
I don't know. It's just like people who will have thoughts in my space. They'll be eating food. Can I get the food in my mouth? Will we give each other COVID as we eat and talk? Will everyone behave, or have we all become so feral that like someone will insist on talking about something awful? Just people seem overwhelming. And I can imagine if you were planning a wedding, and I can't tell you how much in therapy people's lives go in the blender when they head into wedding planning, if you could just step off of that and be like, my partner loves me and we're still here together. That seems good enough.
Are these friends coming tomorrow or like family?
Family.
Oh, okay. That's the difference.
What's the difference?
Well, because you're forced to be with them. These are people that you know, if they're friends, I would assume that you would feel more comfortable and more predicting of things going well, I guess, right?
Yes, and it is intergenerational as well. So,
is Passover laden with a lot of expectations on the host?
There are many special dishes to create. So there's a story. There's a Haggadah, which tells the story of Passover. I personally own 10 different Haggadahs because no one Haggadah, of course, is perfect. And so we're like cobbling together.
Is it in Hebrew or?
It's in Hebrew and English. And then if you're in another culture, it's in that culture. So anyways, a lot of Haggadahs. There's a lot of ways to do it. One person who's coming has their way that they like to do it, but they're not doing it. So they'll try and insert their things. There's matzo ball soup. There's gefilte fish, which you buy canned. And then there's the...
Is that like sardines? No. Sounds like sardines.
Matzo ball, gefilte fish is literally like, what's the cheapest fish you can buy? Grind that up and make it into a patty and serve it cold. So this is
pre-cooked.
Yes, but this is a poor person's party, so it's like.
Well, I can get into. I mean, I'm Japanese.
Yeah.
I can get into some weird fish things.
Cold fish balls. Does Japanese have a cold fish ball?
I mean, yeah, they're fish cakes. They're usually warm, but you can eat them cold. Yeah, and the Japanese make them so that they look like plastic almost. Fish cake. It doesn't look like animal or it looks like flour, but it's all fish.
Interesting.
Yeah. You can fry them. You can da-da-da. Yeah,
I would love some. We should share fish cakes next time we come together.
Yeah.
From our different cultures.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is supposed to be a speed round, by the way.
Yeah.
We've already failed.
Yeah. There's so many emails. But what I'll say is, just piggybacking, that as long as your partner is okay as long as you and your partner are okay with not getting married, then it's not critical to resolve this immediately. So you have time. So there's that. And you're asking, is it a defense against stress? It could be. Weddings are very stressful. The questions I would have is this a pattern, or like, have you had a pattern of avoiding things and then later regretting it or not? Are you getting your needs met with your partner? Is there some, because you didn't really give a lot of detail, which is fine, but I was wondering if maybe this is some kind of worry about getting married to your partner and not just the wedding itself. So obviously you would want to think about that. But yeah, I mean, dreams can be pretty life-changing. It's not usual for it to happen, or you were already thinking it and it just kind of introduced the idea to you.
So Jung would say that dreams are reflections of our unconscious, so maybe the collective unconscious. And maybe you got a message in that dream that you'd been waiting for. Maybe it finally gave you permission.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And showed you a reality that you wanted.
So you sent me a thing, Rebecca. Mm-hmm. I think you did, because I saved it. Dr. Ashley Castro talking on Twitter about or maybe someone else sent this to me.
I sent it.
Okay. That there's a therapist shortage, and all these studies looking into in the United States how many clinicians, not only psychotherapy but also substance abuse treatment, there's a massive deficit of need and an increasing demand. So what did you want to talk about?
Well, so I think that one of the statistics in that article is potentially we're 200,000 therapists short.
Right.
Which I think is probably true as I look around.
One study said 2 million short.
But that's a lot of therapists.
Another one said about 250,000 short.
And so I was thinking you and I could talk it out, like if money was no barrier and politics were no barrier, what is the answer to this?
Higher pay. And because when you have, not only for just seasoned therapists, but right out of the gate. So that's obviously a huge attractor for people. public health initiatives. The more you start educating kids at the age of 7 or 15, not only about getting a therapist if you need one, but also just about the idea of therapy in general. People to this day will email me and say, I just got one, that before discovering my content, they thought that therapy was for quote unquote crazy people and not for everyone. And so, he was sort of thanking me for that. But so there'd be that. And then also reducing the cost, because I'm guessing there's a lot of people who would love to be a therapist, but they can't afford to go into debt. They can't take time off work because they have 3 kids and they're a single parent. And if you provide assistance for that, then you'd have more people. And if we just sort of shaved off the top of the top 10 trillionaires, we'd probably be able to pay for that whole thing and they wouldn't even notice the money was gone, which is upsetting to think about. Or take 3% of the military budget away or something.
Right. I mean, I was thinking, what if there was a mass scholarship fund for the folks that we need most to come in, who are people of color, men and women, to become therapists? What if there was a mass initiative to get people trained? And then for folks like us, what if there was a retention bonus? What if every year you stayed in the field, you got some amount of money? I think that would be very nice.
Well, I think my first initiative would have covered that, right? The just increasing the pay in general.
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who pay with insurance or take insurance, I mean, when was the last time insurance boosted their hourly rate? I remember at one time I was working with a very seasoned therapist who'd been practicing since the early 70s. And she said she made more in the early 70s, not on insurance, than she made in in 2010.
Yeah.
Being paid by insurance.
Yeah. So, yeah. And it's particularly upsetting to me because a lot of people will email in saying they're looking for a therapist and having a hard time. And it's hard anyway, and it's doubly hard when there's a good chance that 19 out of 20 of the therapists that you even reach out to are full and won't even respond, which is annoying to me. That people, do you always respond?
I literally don't have time.
Yeah.
I try. It's better if people email me. If people call me, I'm like, ugh, can I just text them back? Like,
yeah. Yeah. I mean, my outgoing message says my practice is full, so don't even leave a message, because people will, I don't know how they find my phone number, just someone, anyway. Lightning round. So you brought
round.
You brought some weird old Christian books that talk about from the 70s. Where'd you get these?
So, I'm always at estate sales looking for great ephemera for my collage workshops.
Oh.
And this estate sale was so good that I went back on half price day on Sunday to see
Wait, so it's an estate, like the Johnson estate.
Or just Bob's estate. I mean, it doesn't have to be an estate sale. It's a house. Everything in the house that's left in the house.
And then they have
sale.
like a Bon Marché sale day or something?
Yeah. So if it's a huge sale, if it's a multi-day sale, usually Sunday or the last day is half price.
So it's like, liquidation time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So everything, I mean, I walked out on the last day with a huge bag for $15. So
have you ever seen any cassettes or records?
Ooh, okay, often.
That I might want.
Send me a list of what you want. And
text me.
Okay.
Because
text you photos.
we moved into this new house and I finally have space for, and I wanted to get
those stacked, don't you?
Well, I used to have so many records and cassettes and I gave them all up, blah, blah, blah. But I want to get one of those really old school hi-fi stereo systems and actually put in a cassette and anyway, but if you ever see anything, let me know.
Okay, I'll let you know. So this estate sale, round one, was so amazing that I was like, there's probably going to be treasures that are unearthed over the days as all these layers are, come to the surface. I'll come back on Sunday and see what they have. So these 2 books showed up on Sunday. These are Christian education books published in 1979. We looked up the author, and he has been...
Well, we don't know. It's by Michael Campion, and there's a few of them, and at least one of them was fired from a university I'm speculating because he's a pray away the gay sort of guy. But anyway, yeah, so I just described this book. So that Rebecca gave me, Especially for Husbands, is the name of the book. When was the last time? Oh my goodness, what does that even mean?
Well, you'll see when you look
okay.
through it.
And then you have a book for women.
I have Especially for Wives. When was the last time? And then it's ... And then every single page.
Wait, so there's actually a dedication in here. Did you know that?
Yes. So these were given by the daughter to the parents on their 25th wedding anniversary. And there's
in 1980.
And there's a long inscription. And if you know the person, Anne, who did this, we'd love to talk to her about whether these books were effective for her parents.
Yeah. So, all right. So there's a little introduction. Blessed are those who expect nothing. And by the way, the art is just so 70s. It just looks like
black and white, moody.
Blessed are those who expect nothing, for they shall never be disappointed. Blessed are those who expect nothing, for they shall never be disappointed. That's the first thing they're saying for husbands to mind. Okay, well, so just give up all your needs. That's fine. Wait. When it comes to their husbands, most women accept the following guideline. Blessed are those who expect nothing. So they're saying your wives, but let's be real. Oh, okay. So they're denouncing that. All right. So they're saying your wife will be expected to follow the guideline of expect nothing, but let's be real, men, and take loving, positive authority over our families. It's always authority. Why? I don't understand. It's like, why does it have to be it's this obsession with like the head of the family? Like, are you really that insecure and who wants to be in charge all the time? Like, give me a break. This book was written in an effort to help men by suggesting some positive things that they can do to become involved in their homes. All right. Again, it's just that phrasing, right? It's like, get involved in their homes. It's like, yeah. Marriage is like a garden in that if you let it run its course, you get weeds, aka problems. It takes active involvement and planning by the husband to develop a warm and loving family. This book is so let's look at the little tips. Oh, so it's a little picture book. It's like It's made for people with very little time to read. When was the last time that I prayed with my wife? And then they have a picture of two people. When was the last time I complimented my wife in front of the children? All right, that's good. When was the last time I cleaned the bathroom?
When was the last time?
I clean all the bathrooms at our house, actually. I do it every Wednesday, top to bottom. And I think Stacy's in charge of her bathroom. But anyway. When was the last time I asked my wife for her opinion on a decision I had to make? That is a sad state of affairs. I mean, the fact that question is in there, it says it all. When was the last time I went to church with my family? When was the last time I kissed my wife without sex as the object? Probably most of the time. When was the last time I complimented my wife? I would like to think often. When was the last time I made passionate love to my wife? Well, let's just move on. When was the last time I asked one of my children out for Coke and conversation? Okay. When was the last time I sent my wife a card with a tender thought? I mean, all the various different times. When was the last time I babysat so my wife could have a night out? Yeah, I have to say this is very 70s because it's that transition between the before times and today times. And it's like this new introduction, which is good. I mean, it's like you got to meet people where they are, I guess. And it's saying, hey, dads and husbands, like, you can't just avoid the whole thing. You have to be nice. You have to be kind. You have to dedicate. You have to think about her needs. I like that introduction. I wasn't giving you the benefit of the doubt, but so what does yours say?
So mine is the same format. When was the last time I respected him and let him know it?
So applying to your wife, when was the last time you respected her and let her know it?
No, when was the last time I, as a wife, respected my husband and let him know it?
I know, but when was the last time you respected
my
Beth?
wife? Oh, I have to tell this story. I know this is a speed round, but yesterday the power went out. Did it go out up here? Okay. It went out. I'm on the phone with a client. Tuesday is a work from home day. My family erupts in blaming each other for the power, for, you blew a fuse. No, you do. You go. They're like screaming at each other. And I'm like, do I stop the session to go and tell them to shut up? Like, the whole thing was complete chaos. And it just reminded me that living with people is really hard. and you put one disaster in and the whole thing can fall apart. So I don't know. Respect is a hard one. How do you show respect to your long-term partner?
Well, you compliment her in front of me. You say that she's really smart and very capable at her job, and she earns a lot of money, and she's a power player in the legal world. And I don't know. Do you ever compliment her on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I hope I do a good job at that one. This one is fascinating. I mean, a lot of this is a culture that doesn't, it's hard to think it exists anymore, but this one is, when was the last time I gave my husband a chance to express frustrations when he arrived home from work?
Yeah.
So that's the idea that, like, the wife is sitting home all day, and as soon as the man gets...
I don't know about y'all, but... I don't know, I said y'all. I don't know about you, but in the 70s, that was like 98% of the families in my neighborhood. I mean, my family was like that. So... it applied to a lot of people in the 70s. Dad went to work, mom stayed home.
Mm-hmm. See, some of this is cultural. Jewish families have never been like that. Women have always worked. Huh. So the idea that there's there's one person working, I don't know. The idea that you could be a one-income household is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Well, my mom eventually started working from home at a daycare from home, and that, extra income from that. What's another one?
When was the last time I took up activities or friendships outside our home?
Oh, okay. Progressive. I mean, I thought this was going to be disaster. I thought it was going to be, when was the last time I sacrificed my friendships for my husband? Because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what I thought this whole book was going to be about.
Well, and it teeters on it.
Certainly it does. Yeah.
Here's another one. When was the last time I prayed for him while he was at work?
Yeah. Do you have friends? You have me as a friend outside Beth, but do you have other friends?
I sure hope so. Yeah. I mean, I've got some good friends.
Yeah.
But this idea that a woman's whole world was supposed to be fulfilled within the household.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why women went crazy, and that's why the women's movement happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank God. Really. Yeah.
Like that whole, what's her name? There's a famous writer who was a teacher at Evergreen, and she wrote all these books about dispelling the myths. Stephanie Coots.
Okay.
She wrote all these books about dispelling the myths of the 50s. Mm-hmm. That it was a better time and the women were happy and they're...
Make America great again,
yeah.
Rebecca.
And so this idea that we don't need community is such a messed up American...
Yeah. I remember talking... over the years, I've had occasional conversations with my mom. She was born in the 40s, raised in the 50s, and had that, a pretty good dose of that mindset that we're referring to. And it's interesting for me to observe her, because when I was young, my mom was kind of the willing butt of the joke a lot of times. Mm-hmm. A lot of blonde jokes. Remember all the blonde jokes?
It was horrible.
Yeah. And it was, even though irrational, but it was kind of like a mass delusion in my family and extended family that my mom was kind of, I don't know, not a joke, but not competent or something, And then over the years, we'd be talking about something, and I think she would feel safe enough or something to talk about things. And I'll never forget, this was not that long ago, she's saying that because her dad was a major contractor in Spokane, self-made, and built like a lot of the public buildings. He was involved in Expo. I think he was even in charge of the construction at Expo in the 70s of Spokane, and he had 5 kids, and the 3 sons he wanted to be, it was Johnson and Sons was the name of the contracting business, and the sons all had different roles. And my mom always thought she would do better than her brothers, because her brothers were fine, but they weren't as competent or as responsible or as extroverted. Or, my mom, when my mom thought about it, she's like, I'm smart, I'm extroverted, I'm organized, I'm loyal, and my brothers aren't exactly like that. Like, I could do better, but it was never a consideration. It was never something that was talked about. It was never, she wouldn't even have raised her hand because it was just a given. It's not Johnson and daughter. Like, that's it just doesn't happen. And especially in the construction world, probably, the amount of sexism there. And so, yeah. So I don't know. Thank God we didn't make America great again over the last 4 years.
Yeah. Well, and I was really thinking about, even if we don't participate in these values, this is how our parents were brought up.
Right.
I saw this over and over again in my house of like, and it's still true now. I mean, I saw a statistic recently that women who earn more than their husbands also do more of the housework.
Yeah.
So, it never ends in terms of women being expected to do everything.
Right. Yeah. And in 50 years, there will be some book that's published in 2022 that some young whippersnapper podcaster, I'm sure it'll be hologram based at that point with hoverboards, and we'll be laughing at you and me.
Yeah, in their eyeball. We'll be sitting in their eyeball and they'll just be laughing.
Yeah. Actually, along those lines, before we go to break, that does scare me about what in 50 years or even 5 years, that the things that I will say that will be reflective of an oppressive language system or paradigm. And I want to reach out into the future and say, I'm trying my best. No one, if anyone ever tells me anything, I always try to incorporate it. So, but you know what's going to happen. Anyway, let's take a break. What do you say?
Yes.
Hey, deserving listeners, today's episode is sponsored by HelloFresh. When you sign up, use the code Seattle16. HelloFresh sends you easy-to-make meal kits delivered right to your door every week. Ingredients travel from farm to your doorstep in under a week, so they're always fresh, all without having to leave your house, which appeals to me because I hate running errands. Puts me in a bad mood, to be honest. HelloFresh is super flexible. You can skip weeks when you need to. You can pick your favorites from 50 different weekly options. In our house, we love all the recipes, but some of them that are really great are the citrus beef tacos, their barbecue sloppy joes, and their pizzas. You know, me and my pizzas. So go to HelloFresh.com/Seattle16, that's Seattle16, and use the code Seattle16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. Again, go to HelloFresh.com/Seattle16 and use the code Seattle16 for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. And remember that HelloFresh is America's #1 meal kit. All right, we're back from the break. Lightning round, Rebecca.
We can do it this time.
Anonymous patron says, my sister recently came to visit with her husband and my niece, and there has been some friction between my long-term partner and them. My partner feels that they were bad house guests and found my sister's husband domineering and rude. There was no explosive confrontation, but it was tense. It was a tense weekend, and by the end, I think everyone felt rather awkward. Why is conflict with in-laws so common? What is the best way to handle the conflict? Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, this goes back to my Passover story. I mean, everybody has a way that they want things done. So there are probably several unspoken house rules that you have, and you would hope that people would follow them. Or even you can state them, and someone will just think, that's stupid, I'm just not going to do that. So then, as Benjamin Franklin would say, things that are only good for 3 days, fish and visitors. It's very hard to have people in your space. And with in-laws, there's that extra sense of, and they'll be back. And it gets really loaded. You want them to love you. You want to connect. But there can be some real tensions and some very, very different ways of being.
Yeah. For me, I think I get a lot of questions about in-laws, so I'm going to answer more broadly about just in-law conflict. And that is that when we marry someone or we couple with someone, we, especially mainstream Americans will consider it's just that one person. And we'll meet their parents and their sibling. We'll meet those other people, but I'm not interested in, a lot of Americans, I'm not really interested in meeting those people. I don't care to have a relationship with those people. And so, I'll be cordial when at vacations or at holidays or something, but I'm not going to dedicate the time to bond and create safety. And also, if you're marrying someone, you might not actually take the time. So this is my whole point of making sure that your parents, your siblings, whoever is important in your life that is likely to be interacting with you and your family, making sure that those people actually have time to bond properly with your partner. Because when you have moments like this, when suddenly they're at your house and they know you really well, and it would make total sense that they would stay with you because they're in town or something, you haven't spent the time to bond. And so if there's any kind of conflict, which there would be in a situation like that, then everything explodes because there's no goodwill and no communication between those people. So for me, I'm always saying, wherever you're at, plan ahead, be proactive with this sort of thing. You can't just expect people to get along as if they're family just because you married them or you're connected to them. They actually have to bond in the same way that you bonded with that person. So that's my statement on that. Lightning round. Patron Julie from Montreal says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk. Thank you for the podcast." Oh, but just going back, sorry, is
lightning round postponed.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say, anonymous patron, is it might not have anything to do with you, and you're being triangulated into it, and your partner's being a jerk, and your family member's being a jerk, and you're just standing there going like, "It's my fault," when it's not your fault. Patron Julie from Montreal says, "Thank you for the podcast. You inspired me to seek a therapist. I'm curious what type of advice you would give to someone who is feeling love for their partner, but their partner says they're happy in the relationship, but they're not in love yet." Rebecca, what do you think?
Is anyone watching Emily in Paris?
Stacey is.
Love is a very, very tricky thing. Especially now when we don't need partnership in the way that we used to. I think that it used to be most people were partnered by like 2021. And now it's like you could never be partnered. So this idea that, I'm not in love yet. I'm curious if that person thinks love, there's a couple options there. One, they think love takes a long time to grow, which is okay. But the other thing I've heard more of is that people in couples, one person can always perpetually have their foot out the door and think that there's something better down the road. And I would just want to check in and see if that was the story.
Right. It's hard to know what's happening, but yeah, that would be the topic of my exploration is, are you getting your needs met? Because even needs of loyalty and being able to predict the future and all that kind of stuff, because there's a possibility, there's a world where your partner is completely dedicated, completely loyal, 100% in the relationship, but just doesn't frame love the same way you do, or is just taking a little bit more time. There's also another scenario where it is one foot out the door, or the relationship isn't as reciprocal as we would hope. So it's hard to tell. Of course, people from the outside would say deal breaker because he's not in love, but you don't really know. Some people could have trauma about past relationships that it just takes about, they just want to be really sure before they use that word. There's also cultural elements. Some people don't, and when I watch 90 Day Fiancé, sometimes people from other countries, they won't say love or things along those lines, or even have sex, for example, until you are absolutely for sure getting married soon. So, there's various different things. Having said that, love can grow over time. So it's not like it's a for sure negative thing. Anonymous patron from Norway says, "What are your thoughts on the view on honesty seen so much in the personal development world?" Meaning that a lot of personal development gurus will say you got to be honest. that we should tell our partner everything about ourselves, because if not, they don't know who we truly are. I get the impression it is taken from the extreme where people think they should say everything they think and feel, no matter how it might affect the other person. End of email. So it says, it's this radical honesty kind of stuff. But so this anonymous patron from Norway is saying that in the personal development world, they also recommend that. What do you think about that, Rebecca?
Yeah. So this, again, talk about something that came out of the 70s. There was definitely an idea in psychology that you had to tell all your truths all the time.
Yeah.
It didn't work
to
out.
Your children too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It didn't work out very well.
No.
And so people have definitely pulled back on it, but a lot of kind of, the word culty keeps coming to my mind, but definitely like kind of easy fix psychology. This idea that if you're just excruciatingly honest, the right people will come to you. And I have to say, I haven't seen that has worked out.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've thought about this a lot throughout my life personally in relationships. And I used to be of the belief that honesty was best, not about everything, but about most things. And the older I get, the more I think, I don't know. And so the conclusion I have is it's a style of relationship and has its pros and cons. So you just have to think about what you need or what you want. And it's kind of, there's so many different nuances. There's so many different decision trees. Like, say you're annoyed with your partner, and do you be honest about that? Or you see your wife parent in a way that you don't like the way she's doing it, and it pops up in your head, and you haven't been completely honest about that. Is it imperative that you say something? Certainly it's a consideration to say something, but there are times when it's just better to just sort of cope with it yourself. And even just saying that out loud just sounds so funny to me, because for the first number of decades of my life, that was antithetical to everything that I was. But I found it to work in a lot of ways. Well,
and even that being said, so both of my parents are from the southwest side of Chicago. There is probably few places in America that are more honest and blunt and in your face and yelling than those places. And so that's my culture. I'm pretty honest, and it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I've partnered with someone who is 7th generation Seattleite, passive aggressive, always has the right social face on.
Really? She seems pretty honest, though.
Right, but like in a social situation, there's the right way to do it, and she will often like kick me under the table, like, don't say it. Like, I know what you would say in this situation, don't say it. And so, it's just two different styles. That being said, of course, I enjoy my style more. I'm a pro-honesty person, but do I want to hear everyone's opinion all of the time? Probably not. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really complicated, and it depends on your preference for the pro and con mix. And so, but I will know and can say what Rebecca was saying is the blind culty adherence to radical honesty as a superior form of life is ridiculous.
And I think, do you remember Est?
Yeah.
I think one of their tenets was radical honesty.
I didn't know that. But yeah, now it's Landmark,
Landmark, right. But there was a while, I've had friends, and first it was friends' parents, and then it was friends go through it. And you could always spot an Est person, because they were just speaking in this like very honest way, and it was like too much, and you didn't want to be with them. Yeah.
And like I said, if you are in a group of people who are all into that, it could be really liberating and kind of nice, especially if you are accepting of the radical honesty from other people. It's a systemic thing. And that's the other thing to think about. It's not like, should you be honest all the time, or should you, pick your battles? It's, what kind of style of relationship does the system benefit from? It's really complicated. Anyway, patron Steph from Chorleywood says, it sounds like Harry Potter, doesn't it? Chorleywood. I would like some understanding why women stay committed to their men who have treated them terribly, to the total detriment of their life and children. Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, there's a lot of reasons that people stay. One reason is that it's terrifying to leave and there's no support to leave. I mean, the Kardashian Kanye West story is an amazing example. Here's the richest woman in the world and she can't escape her ex-husband's constant abuse and tirades.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to leave. They may have been brought up in a family where this was the norm, or be in a religion that says this is what you have to accept. They may think they're staying for the children and not know how to provide any other way. They may have actually tried to leave. You may not know this, but they may, the average person leaving a domestic violence situation tries to leave 7 times before they're actually able to successfully leave.
Right.
So they may have already tried to leave and something brought them back. So I would say it's very, very complex. And if you've ever worked in a domestic violence shelter, you know that, also that whole world is so completely underfunded that, do you want to take your kids and all of you sleep in 1 or 2 rooms for many, many months until you find stable housing? Like, these are big questions.
Yeah. Yeah. The only I'll add to that, and there's a long list. Obviously, there's sexism and there's oppression in the legal system, like you said, lack of funding. But there's also often a huge attachment that the victim will have with the abuser. We have this paradigm of just like, well, abusive people, they're evil, and you have this sort of vision in your head that no one could possibly be bonded to those individuals, but they often are. I mean, they're in an intimate relationship. Sometimes victims will effectively excise any kind of attachment they have to that person, but a lot of times they do, and the abuser will often excise the victim from other relationships, so they don't have anyone else. And I find that notion is somehow hard for people to, fully comprehend, that we all need people. Humans can function. We do not function alone. We can't do anything by ourselves emotionally. And so when you're faced with either being with someone who is supportive sometimes and being abused and being completely alone and flapping in the wind, a lot of people will choose the prior. Jasmine from California says, when do style choices transform into ethical boundary crossings for a therapist? Style, I think of style of therapy.
No, is this necklace that bad? So sorry.
I mean, I think so. I don't know. I actually have not read this email yet. This is one of the few times where I've just started reading emails that I haven't read prior. Last year, I decided to leave my therapist, who I started going to in high school, and I was going to search for a new therapist who specializes in trauma. In December of 2020, I found one and ran into a huge issue with her, and I still think about, and I wanted to know your thoughts on. In the first 2 sessions, she had me go through all the traumatic events I had been through, which I knew was unethical, but I wasn't as aware of my distress levels as I am now. So just chiming in there, it's not necessarily unethical. It would depend, but it certainly is not the standard of care, and it certainly is not evidence-based, and certainly would raise a lot of risk of harm, obviously. Going on with your email. In the 3rd session, she told me that she believes that sometimes people's parents can hate them, and she believes that is the case with my parents. Although I told her that my one goal in therapy was to have healthier, that one of my goals was to have healthier familiar relationships. So yeah, I asked her to clarify, and she doubled down on this. I was shocked, and I had a panic attack and decided to leave the therapy altogether. So just chiming in, it sounds like the therapist saying, I think your parents hate you, essentially, and so you shouldn't be in a relationship with them or something. She later told me this was a style choice and that she can't change how she conducts her therapy, so we aren't a good match. What are your thoughts on her response to justify re-traumatizing one of her clients? Rebecca, what do you think?
Yeah, it's not a trauma-informed response. This is a way of treatment that may have worked for this person for a long time. I'm often amazed at how many clinicians really can't handle trauma. They do much better with anxiety or depression diagnosis. But if somebody's had multiple traumas in their lives, they're not ready to play that game.
Do you know any colleagues that are people that are like that?
Yeah.
Do you? Because I do too, and I find that at least the ones I'm thinking of right now have a common background of just extreme trauma themselves.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe they haven't done their own work, but I think I told you that I saw someone for supervision for 2 sessions, and the second time I told them they were colluding with the client, and then they fired me because I could you could see it was on video too, so it wasn't even self-report. It was just very obvious that they could just do surface work. So it's different than this style, but also the same, like not addressing what's happening in the session
right
at all. And that's because it's hard work, but it sounds like this clinician has a very specific way of working.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've had massage therapists do this too. Like, this is the way I do massage, and if you don't like it, it's like, fine, then we won't work together.
Yeah.
This is weird.
Yeah. I mean, my thoughts are that if your description is accurate, she's a terrible therapist and she shouldn't be practicing anymore, because a good number of her clients are going to come in to her with chronic trauma and she's going to hurt them. And the clients aren't going to know because they don't listen to this podcast and they wouldn't know that that's wrong. Paul from New York says, when I was 15, my father made me go to therapy, which I was happy to do. But after a few sessions, my dad admitted that he could hear through the walls in the waiting room, and he had heard everything I said.
Boy.
This led to him kicking me out of the home and disowning me forever. This happened 25 years ago. I am not looking for professional advice, but I'd be interested in hearing about the responsibilities of therapists in situations like this, and if you know how common it is that these mistakes are made. Rebecca, what do you think? I mean, you own a building.
Yes, the soundproofing work that I'm a soundproofing. I know a hell of a lot about soundproofing, and there's all kinds of things you can do to soundproof your space. So the fact that this space wasn't soundproofed to the waiting room is concerning for me.
Yeah. It's an absolute responsibility for the therapist. It's obvious that but it's often not explicitly taught in schools. And I find that I have to actually ask my interns and supervisees to speak loudly have someone else speak loudly in their office while they close the door and listen on the outside. And if they can actually hear, then they have some work to do. Obviously there's white noise makers, that kind of thing.
There's a whole industry of sound.
But I find that a lot of therapists don't really think about it that much. And what I emphasize to people is just because someone's not in the room doesn't mean they can't hear. And so if they can hear you, then they're basically sitting in the room with you. How does that make you feel? I feel like people are more visual than audio or. So it's like, well, I can't see them, so everything's fine. And I'll also talk about this when people will take their kids out on an outing as a client and have a session at the park or something. I'll say, if anyone hears anything you're saying, you have broken a clear ethical code. So, or you would need to have a pretty extensive releases before you did that, and it would be questionable as to whether or not that would fly if something bad happens. So yeah, it's extremely frustrating. And for you, Paul, not only did that happen, which is a violation, but you were massively negatively impacted by it. And that's why we have confidentiality, so that these things don't happen, and it happened to you. And that, is shameful on that individual. And I think a little overcommon. I had one of my therapists, that was lightning. We don't usually get lightning and thunder.
I think my commute home just increased by about double.
But my therapist's first office was fine, but her second office that she moved into had a very, very thin door and a very quiet, waiting room. And I could hear what the clients were saying. I just chose not to listen because I'm like, well, and in my sessions, I didn't really mind if some random person heard what I was saying because I didn't really care. But so I've experienced it before,
So my office, so I got to do it myself. So I have solid core doors, which are really expensive. I've got sound kits around each door. I've got...
Meaning it's like a rubber seal that makes it so that there's no air to let sound go around the door. Yeah.
Yeah, I've got double sheetrock on the walls that offices share with a sound absorbing glue. It used to be a paper, but now it's called green glue.
Yep, I have it. It's right above you. It's all over this room, actually.
So much green glue.
Yeah.
And I paid serious money.
Yeah.
So that I could make sure that this was true. And then even with all of that, other folks down the hall have put in a sound machine. So even in that brief period that somebody's passing by a door, fascinating enough, doing all of that messed up the air conditioning system like no one's business because the air can't suck from room to room. It means each room is like a pod on its own. So I learned a lot about systems and how they're all connected.
Yeah, central air is the bane of soundproofing. But yeah.
And there are mufflers. If you were on an air duct with someone else, there's actually a muffler that you can get to put in your ducts,
right?
So that it disturbs the sound. So I that is a horrible story.
Yeah.
But really
are you
sorry.
surprised?
No.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I was at my internship, there was no rooms available. And they would just put me at a desk next to the copy machine with a kid and be like, provide therapy.
Yeah. I would see kids in schools and they would put me in like a closet, like with a bunch of pens and paper and stuff. And random people would come into the closet and get shit while I was working with a client. And I would talk to the schools, but I was so young and I didn't have any power that they would just look at me like, huh? So anyway. Patron KG from BC, she says, is it common for counselors to use non-confidential online platforms like FaceTime for counseling sessions? So she gives a story about how she had some kind of problem with that. I have stepped away from all that information because
I know.
Because I just do phone therapy and I don't supervise anymore.
Yeah.
But I did know at one point, what's the answer to that?
So at the height of the pandemic, the systems that were available, like Doxy and whatever, those systems weren't set up for the sheer amount of people that were needed to do therapy online. And so everything became okay. Because there just wasn't enough bandwidth. But actually, that's why I switched to phone. I was like, this whole thing is ridiculous. I can't stare at anybody's face. And I have to say that when someone's face starts glitching on therapy, I'm out of the whole experience.
Yeah.
So at the height of the pandemic, when everybody was online, all systems were allowed. I don't know if that's true now, and just like you have switched over to the phone.
Yeah. Yeah, there are HIPAA compliant video platforms. I'm not familiar with.
So Doxy there's professional Zoom.
Yeah. I
think there's some that is like a complete service. They do your billing, they offer, but they all are glitchy.
Yeah. Yeah. And my family wants to have a conversation. My niece is getting married in Minnesota later, and everyone wants to coordinate about like when to fly and what hotels we get. And my parents suggested we do a Zoom meeting, and I'm like, I'd rather be on the phone, or I'll come over. How about that? But I just can't stand Zoom anymore. It's just so, I feel like it was fine when it was once a month back in the day, but now I just can't do it anymore. I just hate it.
Yeah. That being said, I now have to present on Zoom every once in a while, and I have got it down. I got my soundtrack going in the background. I got my small groups going. Like when I think about where I was 2 years ago and how I can use it now when I need it. I mean, it is a super cool tool. I can't be on it all the time. That's not.
Yeah. I mean, I was teaching on it. We were meeting with other professors, at the university on it. Us, clients and supervise. It was, anyway. Patron Dinah from Hillsboro, Oregon says, how do I deal with a step-parent who is married to my ex? Wait, how do I deal with a step-parent?
So her ex's new partner.
Right.
Co-parenting.
Okay. How do I deal with a step-parent who is married to my ex? Duh. Okay. I thought she was saying my step-parent, but it's like a step, yeah. Who interferes with co-parenting. My ex remarried very quickly after our divorce. The stepmom refused to meet with me for the first year and a half, and she has been overstepping and doing really hurtful things ever since. She scheduled a parent-teacher conference herself without including me. She organized my daughter's first sleepover when I expressed how important it was to me. She told my kids not to talk to me about her. She stole my Mother's Day this year when I missed last year due to having to be quarantined. I have tried to have a good working relationship with her, but she's made it very clear that she wants to push me out and control everything. Rebecca, what do you think?
Well, some people are real toxic, and this is when having a parenting plan is really important. If there's a toxic individual, if you've got things written down and the court demands them, you've got some leverage. Otherwise, what I've seen is that these people probably won't change. They're behaving out of really severe insecurity and not in the best interest of the child. And it's really hurtful to everyone. Yeah. So you ask, how do you deal with the situation? And I get a lot of emails like that. How do I deal with this? How do I cope with this? And in this situation, a better question is, how do I create a workable situation, a solution to this? And these are very different questions. They're very different orientations. In light of what Rebecca's saying, it might not work because if this woman doesn't go along with whatever you try to do, then, and the other part of this is to accept that she has power, which sucks. She essentially has a tremendous amount of power over your kids and over you. And you didn't choose to let her into your life. Your ex-husband did. And your kids didn't choose. Your ex-husband did. So it sucks. And it's not what you got into when you had kids. It's not the plan, right? You didn't think, well, I hope one day there's an evil stepmother.
Yeah, this rando person, moseys into my life and like literally takes my kids away from me on Mother's Day and starts doing these kind of milestone things with my kids when I want to do that myself. And that sucks, but that's the reality. And I find that a lot of people, you just have to accept it. It sucks. And there's a way to be proactive about trying to mitigate any problems, but it is what it is. So there's that. But how do you develop a workable situation? It's possible the person is, as Rebecca's saying, toxic and, determined to make your life miserable. I've seen that before. But if it's not that, then it's, you have to, as I was saying earlier, you have to develop a relationship with her. And I know you said you tried to, but there are a lot of different ways to try to get that started. And considering you're already hating each other, she probably hates you. It's going to be hard. And this is a message to everyone out there who is not at this point yet. If you're going through a divorce, make sure you're proactive. You go to your partner and, maybe it was a bitter divorce or whatever, but you tell him, if you start dating someone and it starts heading into more serious, we have to work together as parents. So you have to introduce her to me. Me and her have to hang out alone without you because we have to have a good bond. We have to have, at the very least, a workable relationship. And so But of course, who does that? Most people avoid even knowing what their partner is doing with their romantic life. And you might have to swallow your pride. And
can I say one more thing with that? Because this comes up a lot in therapy is, I had this special thing planned. I had this day, this other person ruined it. And I really encourage my clients to make new special days, to pick a new day that is Mother's Day and make that day special. I mean, some things sadly are just going to get taken away from you and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's okay to pick another day and make that day just as special, because if you've decided that Mother's Day is the most special day and it's been ruined for you forever, that bitterness is never going to go away. Right. And I say this as a person who was born on Christmas and has endless bitterness about my birthday. And eventually I just had to pick Halloween and say, I'm going to have a really good time then. And I may not even tell anybody that this feels like a birthday to me, but I clearly cannot have fun with a Christmas birthday. 50 years into this story. Okay. I get it. I get what's happening. So just as someone that has, at one point we had 6 grandparents when my child was young, and so many people wanted Mother's Day, and we were driving all around, and I realized, wait, I'm the mother and it's never even about me. And then to be in a 2-mother household, who gets Mother's Day? And finally I realized, I'm just gonna take Father's Day and go get a massage. There are too many things afoot here, and all of my fantasies about what Mother's Day could be, I need to let go, or I'm just going to be miserable.
Right. Yeah. The last thing I'll say is that almost all the time, not all the time, but almost all the time, these conflicts are based on a perception of threat. You felt threatened by her, and she felt threatened by you. I don't know what that would be. Who knows? But I could imagine her feeling like you're going to shut her out somehow. She wants to bond with the kids, it seems, or you're the ex that's going to take her husband back or something. There's some kind of threat. And if that's the case, you're probably not actually a threat to each other. And so if there's a way that the two of you can talk about it and really reassure each other that neither one of you is a threat to the other person, then these kinds of games will go away, usually.
And how can you guys make it about the kids? So in divorce, there's always this conversation about how can the adults not be pitted against each other for the health of the kids. And I would just ask, and not everybody can conceptualize that, but if you can think about that and work from that place, hopefully all the adults in the story can wonder, how can we make this the best for these kids?
Right.
That now have 3 parents.
Right. Anonymous patron, she wrote in, and I haven't read this email yet, and I don't usually do this, but we're almost at the bottom of this. How can a therapist be conservative? Mm-hmm. I was always under the impression that therapists are anti-racist, LGBTQ plus affirming, care about social justice, sex positive, alternative lifestyle accepting, etc., based on listening to your podcast. But my intention with my professors who are therapists, my interactions with my professors who are therapists, that's another piece of evidence that they're, anti-racist, and learning about the above said topics in my psychology classes in college. So it's very difficult for me to think that a therapist would be conservative when they probably learned about all these topics in their schooling and training, and conservatives' beliefs, in my opinion, seem contradictory to what the research says about the above said topics. But to my shock, after Googling conservative therapist, I was directed to a website dedicated to being a conservative therapist with a National Registry of Conservative Therapists, conservativetherapist.com. On the website, there were many words that had many conservative rhetoric like liberal agenda, First Amendment rights, anti-socialism Marxism, American family values, the intolerable left, and many more. The owner of the website also had her own podcast about being a conservative therapist, which also had the same rhetoric I hear from conservatives. How can a therapist be conservative when there's research that's da-da-da? What do you think about the topics? Can you please shed some light on this? Rebecca, what do you think?
There are whole conservative therapy schools. I mean, you can be a Christian therapist.
Well, some Christians are conservative, some are not. So there's that, because SPU is Christian and conservative-y. And didn't they just have their professors? So in Seattle, we have just a handful of programs of marriage and family therapy, Antioch being by far the biggest one, but the next two are Seattle U and SPU. I think the Seattle school is pretty big. Anyway, point is that SPU's been around for a long time, and
that is Seattle Pacific University, which is a Christian school?
Evangelical is what I would say.
You can't dance. The students aren't allowed to dance.
Is that true?
I think so.
Yeah. I mean, this is all rumor, but I think I read an article about how the parents were forced, or the professors were forced to sign a anti-gay rights pledge or something. I don't know if that's true. But yeah, I'm always, along with you, an honest patron, just completely boggled that. So it's one thing to be a Republican. It's another thing to say things like, I don't know, the liberal agenda, that kind of thing. Meaning that activism for LGBTQ rights or, Black Lives Matter, that is somehow something that you can't relate to at the very least on some level. And so again, it's one thing to be Republican. It's another thing to be conservative. It's also another thing to be conservative in this way, because it's hard to know what people mean by conservative these days. So, but yeah, I'm completely boggled by it. And it's why there are so few therapists and psychologists who adhere to these beliefs. When we actually poll our field, it's a very small minority, but they're there.
Yeah, and also a lot of programs like the one that we both taught at attempt to... It's hard to move through that program if you were conservative, because you have to go through a class that looks at social injustices and therapy in our culture.
Yeah.
And if you can't adopt the appropriate language, you won't be moved forward simply because this work isn't for you.
Well, you'll harm people.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of the liberal, quote unquote, agenda has to do with compassion for people who are oppressed, which is the right thing to do. And if you're a plumber and you don't care, then it's probably not a big deal. But if you're a therapist, it literally means you can't do your job effectively and you're going to harm people.
Well, and there's also a sense, I'd be very curious about what conservative therapists, who they see, and if they do depth work. But I'm guessing there's a lot more kind of focus on a bad thing happened versus understanding oppression and how it impacts somebody's mental health. So the whole framework is different. And I have worked with Christian therapists in the past, that where the focus is always returning to a Bible verse. That is the interaction that happens in a session.
Right. I've supervised Christian therapists actually, which was a weird experience. And one was a fella great guy, and we talked a lot about this. And over time, because in Seattle, it's one of the more atheistic or at least non-religious cities in the States, and so there's not a lot of demand for it, but there is some. And what I discovered with him was that he wanted me to influence him away from some of the ways that he was taught, but he did retain a lot of the format, as you're saying, using a Bible verse, because there'd be people that are heavily Christian coming to him, and that's how they frame their world, which is fine. It's a cultural way of looking at the world. Of course, it gets bastardized or applied in a certain way that's extremely oppressive, like anti-gay or whatever. Or if you're Mormon, you literally believe black people were cast down because of their sin. I mean, that's literally the Mormon faith. Not every Mormon believes that, but anyway, I don't know if I said that right, but so it can be, but they're applied in a at least non-harmful way, however you want to frame that. Christian therapy can be great. The other thing I'll say is that it kind of there's two sides to the sword. What's the thing?
I don't know that phrase. Two axe handles on the it's a double-edged sword.
Double-edged sword. Why did I always have a hard time with idioms? But so on one hand, as you were saying, if you are conservative or Christian or Republican or something, at our school in particular, at Antioch, you have adopted anti-human rhetoric, then you are going to be either forced to change your mind or invited strongly to change your mind, or you'll be excised from the program, or you'll remove yourself because you just can't tolerate it, which is a good thing because we don't want people coming in that don't understand racism, for example, or think it's just some sort of PC nonsense. But the double-edged sword is, on the other hand, you have good, compassionate, aware Christians who at my university can't admit that they're Christian. Mm-hmm. They can't even raise their hand when everyone's blanketly talking about Christians and say, I'm a Christian, and me and all my people that are at my church actually are highly compassionate and totally understand racism, or they're black and they understand racism themselves. And so so sometimes I wonder if some sites like this open up because there are, let's just say, people that we could relate to who happen to be conservative or Christian or something, who find that they can't be themselves and they can't incorporate their life or maybe even some of the lessons that they've learned that we could agree with, or at least aren't harmful, without being labeled as some sort of anti-whatever and, oppressed by the larger group of liberal therapists. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. But the double-edged sword, to double-edge your double-edge.
A third edge? A triple-edged sword?
I'm sure this is like a Star Wars reference. Isn't there like a quadruple sword somewhere? I mean, my fear is that this website is a coded ground for people who are like pro-conversion therapy.
Right.
And that you could go here and you could say, my child is trans and I can't love them. And this therapist would say, that's right, you can't.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I also have interviewed with a Christian therapist here in the Seattle area. He had me on his podcast, but I think I also shared that audio. And he is, staunchly against the conservative agenda, if you will. But, totally Christian and believes in all this stuff and talks about it with his clients and all that kind of stuff. Anyway. But yeah, it's interesting. It's a weird world we live in, and it's getting weirder every day with the Facebook echo chambers. Mm-hmm. And I worry about us as a species. So we got, 80% done.
That's amazing. We're amazing.
And so, but I feel like, that's good enough for today.
That's
right?
good enough.
Yeah.
You're good at this.
We did good lightning round.
We're good.
Yeah, we got to 8 out of the 12 pages.
That's amazing.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm so proud of us.
Yeah. Final word, Rebecca.
Final word. So it is spring is here. Happy Passover to those who partake. Happy Easter. Happy Maypole Day just around the corner to all my pagan friends.
Happy Boys Day on May 5th.
Oh, happy Boys Day. We're in a period of...
in Japan, by the way.
Rebirth, coming back out of the soil. If you're in Seattle right now, it is spectacular and like emerald green. And so we've had a rough winter, and I'm wishing everybody a slightly better spring.
rough winter because of Omicron and stuff?
Omicron, yeah.
Or Omnicron, as you called it?
My world famous Omicron. Ukraine has so many people freaked out. I know I had all of my nuclear war dreams that I hadn't had in 40 years since I was
really?
a kid.
You've had dreams?
Yeah. I mean, definitely that, like, you know, all those songs about nuclear war and Sting, I hope the Russians love their children too. I mean, all that stuff really got to me as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, me and Stacy talk about that a lot, how it, with the, you know, the wall coming down, the Iron Curtain, that it was just, the threat just dissipated, seemingly. Mm-hmm. And now it's back to some extent. And sometimes I hear younger people talking about how stupid we were back then to worry about such a thing. And I think, you're stupid because you don't understand. It was an absolute threat. Reagan was regularly talking about escalation and also labeling the evil empire. You know, he was calling them out. He was essentially saying they're not just a rival, they need to be taken out. And that's obviously a huge threat. And all those, the thousands upon thousands of warheads that were pointed at each other weren't there because there was no reason to worry. Those things were there because it was a real possibility. And you and I and Stacy grew up our entire childhoods with that threat looming over our heads at all time.
And, you know, the movie War Games, I mean, I must have watched that movie 100 times because there was an answer at the end of that movie. But then there was The Day After. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
I mean, the idea that, like, some of us would live through this and have to...
Did you watch it live?
Oh, yeah.
I didn't watch it live. I don't know why.
Probably because it was terrifying and someone talked you out of it. I mean, there were piles of bodies. Anyways... Oh, shout out to my cousin in Denmark who's taken in a Ukrainian family, a family of 4.
Does your cousin listen to the podcast?
No.
Oh, well, shout out energy-wise.
But I just think that's, I mean, to think of our Jewish history, and then I have, you know, some of our Jewish family members are moving back to Europe.
Weren't Jewish people, like, genocided in Ukraine not that long?
Oh, yeah. That's my family history.
Yeah.
I can bring in an image of all of the relatives that we lost.
In Ukraine specifically?
Yeah. I'll bring it in the next time. But, you know, this idea that you would move back to Europe and then have enough stable housing to offer it to a group on the run from war. I mean, it's just kind of this amazing...
To the great-great-grandparents of the genociding people.
Yeah. You know, it's... Well, there's still...
Their great-great-grandchildren, sorry.
There's still something like 800,000 Jews in Ukraine. Like, it's a huge country, and it still has a huge Jewish population. Even though
really?
Yeah.
Because isn't in Poland, like, there's hardly any Jewish people anymore?
Yeah.
So
I could be totally wrong on that statistic on how many Jews are in Ukraine.
Let's look it up.
But it has a large... and the president is Jewish. His parents survived the Holocaust, I think.
Okay.
Am I just making stuff up?
There are 400,000 Jewish people.
I was half right.
Yeah. Poland. Because
There's... If you want to follow a great red website... or
there are 15,000 Jewish people in Poland.
Because Hitler went there hard because we looked just like the way... that he didn't want us to look because we look just like me. Anyways, there's a Jewish resurgence in Poland, if it could make it through this current president. And the Krakow JCC Facebook page or Instagram is just one of the most delightful things I've ever seen.
What do you mean? Why?
Because it's Krakow was the Jewish capital of Poland and was considered the cultural capital of Poland for centuries. And the Jewish community was completely decimated there. And there's a small group of Jews there trying to reinvent Judaism in their own community. And it's just the sweetest. I mean, if you want your heart, like, twisted in love, it's, I don't know, there's something that just gets to me.
Yeah.
To be in a land that I know my relatives are from. I've never been there. But they tried to stomp us out. Literally, they gassed us, killed us, did everything, and we're still there. It's kind of a miracle.
Yeah. Well, if we went to this conservative Christian therapist website, they might have something different to say about that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from them.
Stop pushing your liberal agenda. Your
Just
PC.
Come here and make me.
All right. Well, that is it for that episode. Everyone out
That's
there,
it.
please take care of yourself because
I think you're worth it.